Do the Baltimore Ravens' early free agent moves signal they're all in on an offensive lineman in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft? We'll talk about that and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming at you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you so much for being here with me and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. If you'd like to listen in audio form on any podcast provider, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we had you covered. Also, if you're a video watcher, like watching on YouTube, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're 5 days a week of Ravens content, plus bonus content as well, Monday through Friday. And also sometimes on the weekends, we did a bonus episode, I didn't even mean to do it really, but there was news to talk about. So we did the bonus episode about Patrick Queen talking spicy. So we have that for you as well on Locked On Ravens. Whenever there's a big piece of news after games, we also go live. So a little bonus content on the show. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. We're 1 week into free agency now. Well, at least legal tampering wise. Legal tampering actually started last Monday, so technically today marks 1 week since free agency first started. The Ravens only one outside edition at the time of this recording, have lost plenty of players, but as it is Monday, I did want to shift and do a little bit more of a draft-focused episode today. While we'll still talk about free agency, obviously, and I think now we have a little bit of a better idea, at least, compared to what the Ravens had roster-wise, what they're going to do in the draft this time around, but we'll continue to get a better idea as free agency goes along. But the Ravens have made some moves along their offensive line. They've lost some guys, traded some guys away. And so today we're going to be talking about first if the Ravens are just really locked in on taking an offensive lineman in the first round of this draft. And then we'll get into another mock draft Monday. I'll do my mock draft that I had, and then we'll get into some free agency updates as well as getting into some mock drafts from Twitter. So jam-packed episode, as always, on Locked On Ravens. When isn't it? I mean, maybe more towards the lull period of the off seasons, but we're not there yet. We're in the thick of free agency, and it's really exciting. So I'll start off with this topic. Are the Ravens locked in on an offensive lineman in the first round? Well, first, let's go over what they have on the offensive line, and it is not a lot, at least compared to what they were starting last season. The Ravens currently have 3 holes in their offensive line that they have to fill. Ronnie Stanley, Tyler Linderbaum were the 2 guys still on the roster that started games for them last year, at least were entrenched as starters when healthy. Now, John Simpson is gone to New York. Morgan Moses also gone to New York. Free agency signing for John Simpson and a trade over back there for Morgan Moses. And Kevin Zeitler is still a free agent at the time of this recording. Maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. But right now, the Ravens do have 3 holes on their offensive line. Now, they do have some guys that, depending on how you feel about them, they might be able to fill in. Ben Cleveland. You can maybe look to a guy like Saleh. Maybe Andrew Voorhees is somebody you really liked in the draft. I mean, I know I did, but who was Voorhees at the NFL level? Daniel Falele got some reps in that rotation the Ravens had last season. Even Patrick McCary I like him as a super sub offensive lineman. If you're an everyday, you know that, but maybe he gets an opportunity to start with that cap number he has, which is very much so a lot more than other backups get, but McCary, I think, is that valuable to him. But then you look at the offensive line class, right? And you're thinking, well, we see in free agency all these guards getting money. I mean, John Simpson got $9 million per year. That was I don't know what everybody else was thinking he was going to get, but I did not expect John Simpson to get a whole lot of that. So first of all, good for John Simpson for getting that money, but that's not what I was expecting. Robert Hunt goes to Carolina, 5 years, $100 million. You can even look to a Damian Lewis who went to Carolina. That was about 4 years, $53 million. So guards are getting paid. And usually what it is the guard position, still you make money, right? Offensive line's still a valuable position, but usually it's the tackles. Now, we saw Tyron Smith sign with the Jets 1 year up to $20 million. So incentives there, but still tackles are the premium position. That's what I thought was going to be the more lucrative market overall. But guards even so now are more lucrative than I thought they were going to be, at least that whole position in free agency. So you look at the offensive line class, and it's about tackle-wise, 7 to 8 deep of guys who just get taken in the first round alone. and really deep throughout. There are a bunch of guards also. The Ravens don't need a center, so I'm not going to get too much. I mean, there obviously are a couple of big name prospects that could go in the first or second round, but the Ravens don't need a guy like that unless you want to kick him to guard, and that would be that. But I'm focusing more on tackle for the Ravens. Now, obviously, guard is a position, but I just feel like the Ravens, if they wanted to go internal, they have more options right now there, like Cleveland or Saleh, who I do think is better at guard than tackle, and also Voorhees, whereas at tackle right now, it's only Falele, and on top of that, you might have another hole next year with Ronnie Stanley if he doesn't get extended after his contract restructure. We also talked about that, by the way, in the bonus episode on Saturday. We talked about Patrick Queen and his comments, and also we talked about Ronnie Stanley's restructure. I'll do a quick Spark notes on that for here with the restructure. Essentially, Stanley reduced his cap hit for this year by, I think it was like $9 million or so, and he actually cut the last year of his deal off. So he's now a free agent after next year instead of after 2 years. So it helps out the Ravens a lot from a cap perspective, but also it gives the Ravens, if Stanley doesn't perform well this season, a way out that is not going to completely cripple their cap. I think it's a $1.6 million dead cap hit if he is not extended. It's a lot better than it would have been. It would have been at about 9-ish million or 6-ish million if he were to still be on that contract. So you look at that and you think, well, look, if you draft a tackle in the draft this year, you can either play him, you can plug and play him right away. You could kick them to guard for a year. I think if you draft a tackle in the first round, you have to play them in some way, shape, or form. The Ravens, and I've said this for a while now on this show, you're in a position if you're Baltimore, you can't afford to just keep your first round pick on the bench all year. You can't do it. You are in a spot with Lamar Jackson's contract where it is more important than ever to hit on your draft picks and your free agent veteran signings and signings in general. So you can't just afford a first round pick. Super valuable, right? The Ravens don't like trading them. They like keeping them. You cannot, if you're Baltimore, draft a tackle and then sit him for a year, right? We had that conversation with Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses. If they kept both, what would you do there? If the Ravens feel like Falele is their guy, then that's it. But if you draft a tackle in the first round, if I'm the Ravens, I'm probably putting him a right tackle for next year and just having him play. And then you can figure it out down the line if you want to switch him over to left if Stanley doesn't come back in here. But then who are these tackle prospects? Now, they're not going to be in like Joe Alt territory or anything like that, right? But there are a couple guys linked to the Ravens. Now, Troy Fautanu is, I think, a popular name for a lot of people. Hint, hint. We'll talk about him in the second part of the show. But he had an incredible combine, and he has a lot of great versatility. I love Troy Fautanu as a prospect, but probably not going to be there for the Ravens unless they trade up for him. So then you talk about potential guys who could be there. Is J.C. Latham going to be there? Is Armarius Mims going to be there? Tyler Guyton or Jordan Morgan, one of those players. Patrick Paul, I think Patrick Paul gets graded differently. Some people have him as a late first. Other people have him as a late second. It really depends how you feel about Patrick Paul. But the Ravens will have options at 30. They can even trade up for a guy like Fautanu if they want. They have 9 picks, and if they fall in love with a guy who, again, it's not going to be Joe Alt territory, but if they fall in love with a guy who falls to 18 or 20 or 22, and the Ravens want to make that move up and sacrifice a mid-round pick to get their guy, I think they could. Now, were they locked on an offensive line in the first round? Do they have to take an offensive lineman in the first round? My answer to that would be no. They don't have to, but it makes the most logical sense, right? You could easily take a wide receiver or a corner or an edge guy, and you would be fine with that pick. But my thing is you have to take an offensive lineman if you're Baltimore, round 1 or round 2. Has to be one of those two. There is enough depth, even at guard in this draft, where you can get a really quality player who would maybe be a first round pick in other drafts on the offensive line class in round 2, even though the Ravens are way, 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 way back in that second round, just because, they lost in the AFC Championship game. You can still get enough. You can still get a talent there. But you have to, in my opinion, take an offensive lineman at least in the first 2 rounds. And I would expect this to be an offensive line heavy draft. If there's a stud wide receiver they love that falls, if there's a stud corner that falls or edge, and they don't love the tackles, that's fine. What you could also do is you could also trade back into the early 30s, pick up an extra 3rd round pick or 4th round pick, or even another second, depending on how far you trade back. And you would still have options in the 30s or maybe even early 40s of guys who maybe you would have taken at 30 anyway. The Ravens will probably have, and this is how it plays out for most teams, they'll probably have 6 or 7 guys on their board at 30 who they'd feel comfortable with taking. Now, it depends how much they're in love with a certain prospect, but if they're like, yeah, we'd be okay with these guys, doesn't really matter, right? They might trade back and say, we're going to risk X guy not being here, or we're okay if X, Y guys go because we know we're still going to get 2 of those 6 guys or 3 of those 7 guys on the board by the time we're up, and you pick up extra draft capital. So a lot of different ways the Ravens can do it, but the Ravens absolutely, in my opinion, have to draft an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds of this draft. The draft is deep enough where you can make it so you can draft an offensive lineman in the second round, but in my opinion, those 2 rounds have to be just one of the 2. You can even draft them in both, but I think that's a little much. I'd honestly rather them draft a first-round offensive lineman than maybe a mid or late round guy to cap that off. Coming up, though, we'll be talking about my mock draft I did for yesterday. We'll talk about it here today on Mock Draft Monday. And there is an offensive lineman taken in the first round. Hint, hint. Stay tuned. We'll talk about that here coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost in every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply, not for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Rated's Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is registered broker-dealer. We're back our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here. We talked about if the Ravens were locked in on a first-round offensive lineman in the first round of the draft. Still, it's creeping up on us fast. We still have over a month to go before that happens, though. So it's plenty of time for Mock Draft Mondays, and we've done a couple of them so far. Start week after the Super Bowl. We're going to get into a different one here today. Now, again, how these work, if you're new to the show, if you're an everydayer, you've heard this before. But I do a mock draft every single Sunday. I put it out on Twitter, and then I have, put out a tweet on the Locked On Ravens account saying you can comment your mock drafts below for the opportunity to have them to be read out on the show here today. Again, I see all the mock drafts that are put out there. I apologize if I can't get to yours during the show. It's just, this started off, years and years ago when I first started doing the show. I was able to read off everybody's because I just, I didn't have as many people commenting their mock drafts, but now I get so many of them, and I still want to put that time and effort into grading them out where I just can't get to all of them, but I do see them, and I appreciate everybody who submits their mock draft. But we'll first get into mine, and then we'll get into the others along with free agency updates in the final part of the show. So I'll start off with mine, and if you didn't get the hint, obviously I took Troy Fautanu, the offensive lineman from Washington, in the first round. Now, there's a lot that I like from Troy Fautanu. You have a lot of different traits like strength, like athleticism, the versatility. You can kick him into guard if you want to. He's someone that I think fits a lot of Ravens boxes and checks a lot of Ravens boxes. Now, the thing is, he fits and checks a lot of other teams' boxes too. So you're looking at that and, might not be there for Baltimore when you're talking about a player that in this offensive line class, you're going to get guys that fall. But, if there's a team that also sees those traits in Fautanu, they're going to take him, and that's going to be something that the Ravens would have to trade up for him. So the fact that he fell to 30 here, my mantra is if the mock draft simulator gives it to you, you take it. So I'm not complaining about that one bit. And Fautanu is someone that if he falls to 30, it'd be like a Kyle Hamilton situation. Honestly, I do not know how that would happen, but hey, you know what? Maybe it does. But that's someone that I think the Ravens, it's along that type of mold. And there are a couple other players that do fit that. I mean, again, a Jordan Morgan wouldn't be terrible. A guy like Tyler Guyton wouldn't be terrible also. But it's just a matter of figuring out for Baltimore how they can work around maybe a guy falling that they want to, or maybe they love a guy and he ends up going a little earlier than you expect. It's all the uncertainty that the draft ends up bringing. Next, we get Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina. This is somebody that I think a lot of people expect to be gone by 62. I think that a lot of people have fallen in love with him after workouts and just him playing the way that he did. I don't expect him to be there for the Ravens at 62, but again, if the mock draft simulator gives it to you, you have to take it. So this is somebody that I think could fit right in with Zay Flowers, with Rashad Bateman, and give you the body type receiver you want. He's somebody that has a bigger body, good in contested catch situations. The Ravens don't need another Zay Flowers type receiver, right? They have that. I think what you need now is that jump ball player, and he definitely gives that to you for the Ravens. Then I took back-to-back corners, DJ James, Auburn at 93, and Kyrie Jackson, Oregon at 113. Now, both these guys actually played at Oregon. James ended up transferring to Auburn, but Jackson's one of my favorite players in this draft in terms of corners. I think he goes second, third round instead of fourth, where I got him, but again, I will take that. He's someone with height 6'4". I expect him to be really good. And DJ James around 6'1", has inside-outside versatility. Both guys really physical, really good tacklers as well. So James is more of a guy who, will leg tackle you, sacrifice his body. I think Baltimore, these guys both play like Ravens, and they need corner depth, right? Brandon Stevens, a free agent after the season. Both Jalen Armour-Davis and Pepe Williams haven't really given you enough to trust them. It might be time to just reinvest in corner, especially with Marlon Humphrey's contract being a little bit of a conversation point coming up in recent seasons. I took Jonah Ellis, edge from Utah at 130. Huge jump in production from Jonah Ellis in his last season at Utah, 12 sacks. I think this is a player where we talk about the edge position for Baltimore. We don't know who to trust, right? I mean, Lafe Owe, he's the guy I think you can trust the most on the roster right now, but we've seen some flashes from him, also some inconsistencies. David Ojabo, you can't trust at all because the injury situation has not played out for him. We'll see if they bring back Jadeveon Clowney or Kyle Van Noy. I expect them to bring back one of the two, but we'll see how that works out. Javon Foster, 165 for me, offensive tackle from Missouri. A lot of great traits. This is a developmental prospect, not going to start for you day one. That'd be a Fautanu thing. But you need to have the depth, right? I think it does not hurt to take swings on depth offensive linemen, especially ones who is as physically gifted as Javon Foster is. Kamani Vidal, running back out of Troy, is my pick at 218. He's a smaller back, but I think he's the perfect complement until Keaton Mitchell comes back to the offense. He can provide you some of that same spark. You have Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, and Vidal until Mitchell comes back, and then you can kind of seamlessly slot out. It's not going to be a conversation point unless Vidal, again, absolutely takes the Keaton Mitchell route, honestly, and tears it up. But you can slot him out, insert Keaton Mitchell back in the lineup, and then you still have that production there. Now, this pick caused a little bit of controversy for me, but a lot of people actually loved it. I picked Joe Milton out of Tennessee at 228, the quarterback. We saw Tyler Huntley sign with the Browns yesterday. We'll talk about that in the final part of the show a little bit more, but Josh Johnson, who they re-signed, is not going to be around forever, and we don't know about Malik Cunningham yet. I think a quarterback room of Lamar, Cunningham, Josh Johnson, and Joe Milton, I'd take that. I would. I think you could easily bring back Josh Johnson on the practice squad. If you want to keep the three quarterbacks, keep Milton on there. Milton has insane arm strength. Now, the accuracy leaves a lot to be desired, but that is stuff that hopefully over time will improve. So I think that Milton, again, with Lamar, you don't have to have a guy that starts, right? Lamar's your starter until he's gone, essentially. So I think Milton is somebody who, if he turns into a great backup, that's awesome. It's a risk. And again, 228, you can take that risk at 228, right? And then Jacob Monk, the offensive guard from Duke, I took at 250, super physical guard. I expect him to be gone a lot earlier than this, in my opinion, but very offensive line heavy draft for me, as was the theme of this whole thing. And that's what I think the Ravens are going to do. Even if they don't take an offensive lineman in the first round, I still expect them to take at least 2 offensive linemen, if not 3. And we know Eric DeCosta. We know he loves to move up and down the draft board. So again, if there's a player that he loves, he might trade up for him. If there's not a lot of guys who he really has a liking for at a pick, he might trade back and get more draft capital to move around with. I do not expect the Ravens to make all 9 of these picks in the spots that they have right now. Maybe they do make 9 picks, but I don't expect it to be the case. So maybe you package your 2 7th rounders and you move for a different guy, or maybe you package the 4th rounder you got from the Jets to move up to take a guy like Fautanu if he doesn't actually make it a 30, which I highly do not expect he does. So there are a lot of different options for Baltimore, but I actually really like this mock draft. And by the comments I got on Twitter, I think this was the favorite mock draft for a lot of people that I have done so far. So I appreciate it if you liked it. I think, again, the top 4 to me excite me. Fautanu, Leggett, James, and Jackson. Those 4. Then you have the developmental guys with Ellis, Foster, Vidal, Milton, and Monk. I think this is a really solid draft altogether for me. So I'll give myself a little pat on the back for that one. I will personally. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll take a look at some free agency updates for the Ravens, get a little bit more into what Patrick Queen had to say, because there are more spicy updates about Patrick Queen and a lot more. Stay tuned. We got plenty to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. There have been plenty of fresh hitting ticket buying experiences I've had over the course of my life. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good, other times I couldn't find last minute tickets, and sometimes there are just no good deals at all. Shouldn't have to worry though when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater events near you with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The Gametime app, there's a lot going on over there. Obviously, with the Orioles, opening day is just absolutely creeping up on us. Going to be an electric atmosphere, so Gametime got you covered there. Plus, concerts in the Baltimore area are very exciting as well. Gametime has last minute tickets on the app, flash deals, zone deals. They have views from all the seats in the venue. Plus, Gametime's already ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seats before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Plus, they're also obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on your tickets. With zone deals, big session and Gametime, big seats are big time savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Gametime for last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Really appreciate everybody again for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We are available for you and free 5 days per week. So audio form, video form. It is the same show, both audio form and video form. So you're not missing out on any content. We put live shows up in audio form after the fact. Bonus episodes go up in audio form after the fact. So you can tune into those on YouTube where they premiere. But obviously, if you're an audio listener, they're obviously there for you as well. So tell a friend, tell a family member. We have 5 days a week of Ravens content for you every single week, plus more, even during the lull periods of the offseason, right? Sometimes after the draft, there's a bit of a drop-off in content. We're still going 5 days a week. This is episode 1,206 consecutively for me here. I've never missed an episode. Holidays, birthdays, whatever it is. It's been a grind, but it's a grind I've loved. So I appreciate everybody for being here with me and going with me along this journey. We're going to be talking about some free agency updates and everything that's gone on over the weekend, plus getting into some mock drafts from Twitter as well. So I think the big topic is the spiciness of Patrick Queen and kind of how that thing has gone and how, I don't want to say out of hand it's gotten, but it's gotten a lot bigger than I anticipated it actually being. Now, just for some context, before we get into the actual new updates on it, long story short, Patrick Queen obviously signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers, 3 years, $41 million. That obviously makes a lot of Ravens fans upset, right? Going from the team you love to the enemy. Obviously, it'll ruffle some feathers. Little bird reference in there for the Ravens. But regardless, Patrick Queen goes there, and then everybody's saying, people are trashing him. People are saying you're going to the enemies now. You're not, this, that, and the other. And then he has his introductory press conference, and he ends up talking about how he wants to be the villain. He has something for the Ravens. He wants to be that guy. And so obviously that ruffles a little bit more of the feathers, and everybody's going at him, saying that, Roquan made him and he was never good and this, that, and the other, which Patrick Queen, by the way, I think we have to be objective about it, where he was not great his first couple of years. The start of his third season, he was beginning to get it. And then Roquan came in and elevated everybody, including Patrick Queen. Queen's a good player, and we're going to see now, right? He's going to have his own defense in terms of the middle linebacker spot. This is his time. And this is what I'm saying, where now we get into the new stuff where Patrick Queen ends up going on to Twitter after everybody's, trashing him and saying, yeah, can you just stop? Can y'all just, put some profanity in there, but he said, can y'all just stop? And then he said, go touch some grass. It wasn't up to me, all this stuff. I'll find the tweet quickly here as I'm talking to read it out, because it was a long, it was a paragraph. It was quite the tweet. So he ended up saying, oh, this is not it. This is something. There's so much Patrick Queen stuff. Okay, here we go. Patrick Queen says, honestly, bro, can y'all just, profanity in here, can y'all just stop now? It's not even that deep for us players until game week, and y'all can't understand the fact it wasn't up to me. I gave y'all everything and I had. Now when it's time for me to go do what I need, y'all hurt about everything I say. Go touch some grass and fill the void in your life. To one, still showing love, even with the switch. This not to y'all. So Patrick Queen essentially saying that, and there are a couple of things to unpack. People are saying, what do you mean it wasn't up to you? What do you mean it wasn't up to you? So he can mean a couple of different things by that. And Geno Stone essentially said the same thing when he went to Cincinnati. He said the same thing. It essentially could mean that he just said to his agent, pick the one that offers me the most money. And if that was Pittsburgh, then so be it. If that was Cincinnati, so be it. It could mean that. Or it could mean that the Ravens didn't even offer him and said, hey, you know what? We know you're not going to be here. You're not in our plans. We're not going to offer you a contract. And that could have been it. So if he says it wasn't up, so maybe he would have re-signed with the Ravens, but the Ravens didn't even offer him a contract. And so that was kind of the end of that chapter. So there are a couple of different ways, but again, it's the fact that for a lot of fans, at least, that he said he talked all that talk at the press conference, right? Saying, yeah, I'm the villain. I want to be the villain. I have something for them when I see him. He's talking about how he said he is where he wants to be. He's where he's wanted. He's where he's happy. And now he's going on Twitter and saying, can you guys just stop? Can we take a step back? Can we stop doing that? And everybody's saying, what type of villain does that? Well, what type of villain talks all that talk and then can't walk the walk? Now, Patrick Queen did say that he stood by it, and that's the last he's going to say on the situation. So maybe that's the last we'll hear from him on the whole thing. But it's almost like now you have to cash those checks if you're Patrick Queen. And maybe your teammates have to do it for you on some occasions too, because the first sign of Lamar Jackson juking Patrick Queen, of Derrick Henry trucking Patrick Queen, first bad play Patrick Queen has against the Ravens. Even before then, honestly, what Ravens fans are going to be hawking. I bet people are going to be hawking in on Patrick Queen, looking for every single little mistake he makes, and they're going to take to Twitter and they're going to let him hear about it, saying should have stayed in Baltimore, shouldn't have talked all that talk. But it's going to be a whole nother level once you end up hitting the Ravens and Steelers games. He might have single-handedly just rejuvenated this rivalry, at least for the fan bases. He might have single-handedly done it. So a lot of spiciness with Patrick Queen, but now you have to stand by that now. There is no going back from what Patrick Queen is saying right now. You have to cash those checks, and if you don't, maybe your teammates have to do it for you in certain situations where you're maybe not having a good game, and the Ravens are fired up because maybe some of them, he said it was all jokes with his teammates, but maybe some of those teammates come game week use that as motivation, and then all of a sudden you're talking and writing checks you can't cash. So we're gonna see how it all unfolds, but man, I'm pumped for those Ravens Steelers games. Deshaun Elliott's over there now. Obviously, the other situations with that, as Geno Stone goes to the Bengals, Tyler Huntley goes to the Browns. So a lot of Ravens leaving for division rivals, which is very interesting. Now, we did see Odell Beckham Jr. give a goodbye to the Ravens on social media yesterday on Instagram. It was a long one. It was a very heartfelt one as well. Long story short, Odell ended up saying, swear on everything I appreciate the flock more than y'all could ever imagine. Did everything I could with the opportunities I had. Wish I got to do it. Big for y'all with a ring, so a Super Bowl ring. Thank you for the vibes. The city of Baltimore, I mess with y'all forever, for real. And most importantly to my brothers over there, this profanity is a lifetime sentence. I love y'all. Big truz with a bunch of emojis on there. Odell really liked his time in Baltimore, right? I think there were a lot of questions going into it about how Odell would fit, how he would mesh, how he would vibe with everybody. It feels like Odell really enjoyed his time. We can talk about the production. We can talk about how it was nowhere near $15 million worth of production. I understand that, right? $18 million if you want to go up with incentives. It wasn't worth that in terms of his production. But the leadership was great. I think Zay learned a lot from him. I think Rashad Bateman learned a lot from him. Even Lamar learned a lot from him. I just think if he was on an $8 million contract, I think a lot of people would have been a lot happier with how Odell's tenure played out with the Ravens. But since it was that big of a number, obviously you want more production. And I think that's where people are saying, well, there's no way he produced like that. There's no way he lived up to that number, which he didn't. He did not live up to that number with his production in terms of pure on-field, regular box score stats. But does go beyond that, obviously, and I think Odell did have an impact on the Ravens. Obviously, I think a lot of people just wish it was more on the way of, catching passes, catching touchdowns, picking up yards for the Ravens. Let's get into a couple of mock drafts. So nothing else really happened over the course of the weekend for the Ravens. I mean, obviously the big news, the Steelers getting Justin Fields for essentially peanuts from the Bengals. That was really it there. But we'll get into a couple of mock drafts from Twitter here. Again, I just go on the first couple ones that I see. Let's first get into one from Eric Clark, who has the Ravens taking Jordan Morgan, the tackle from Arizona, at number 30. Then you have Kieran Amidaji, the tackle from Yale, at 62. Mason McCormick, the guard from South Dakota State, at 93. Javon Baker, wide receiver from UCF, at number 113. Isaac Guerrero, Louisville running back, at 130. Braden McGregor, Michigan edge, at number 165. Trey Taylor, Air Force safety, at 218. Curtis Jacobs, Penn State linebacker, at 228. And Tim Smith, defensive line from Alabama, at 250. 3 straight offensive line picks. Honestly, Eric, I don't blame you for doing it. I mean, I think it's what a lot of people are thinking right now. If you want to talk about Ravens locked in on offensive lineman in the first round, yeah, Eric's locked on an offensive lineman on the first 2 days of this draft. I like Jordan Morgan a lot. He's someone that I think can make a huge impact and is kind of climbing up draft boards a little bit, in my opinion. And then you take tackle guard back. I mean, again, 3 offensive linemen, wide receiver still need, edge is still a need. I think linebacker and defensive line are luxury picks, but do not blame you for taking them. I think that, again, I'd maybe take out one of the 2 later offensive linemen. Maybe I'd throw a corner in there. I do think that, it's so different with positionless defenses now, who you can play at corner, safety, where everybody might just start being labeled as defensive back now. Just talk Trey Taylor defensive back out of Air Force instead. But I still think maybe a pure corner would have been better instead of one of the offensive line. But I do like all 3 of those prospects personally. So I like the thought process from Eric here, because I think it's what a lot of people are thinking, where the biggest need on the Ravens right now is 1,000% offensive line. And they're going to have to revamp this unit. And obviously, if you have enough swings at it, you will find quality playmakers there. And let's get into one quickly here from Dave Stahl, who says, let's ride Jordan Morgan, offensive lineman from Arizona, number 30. Cooper Beebe, offensive lineman from Kansas State at 62. Josh Newton, corner from TCU at 93. Cam Hart, corner from Notre Dame at 113. Brendan Rice, wide receiver from USC at 130. Isaac Garenda, running back from Louisville at 165. Miles Cole, edge from Texas Tech at 218. Jaquan Shepard, corner from Maryland at 228. And Jordan McGee, linebacker from Temple at 250. So this one, not quite 3 like Eric, but Dave has 2 offensive linemen. Again, this is the topic. Ravens' biggest need is offensive line. Jordan Morgan flying up draft boards right now, and I think BB's a solid player as well. Josh Newton, I do like. He's in that crop of like DJ James and Kyrie Jackson, who I've talked about. Newton's in that conversation. Max Melton in that conversation. So I do like Josh Newton. Cam Hart as well kind of goes the back-to-back corners at 93, 113 like I did as well. Brendan Rice, I think, is a sleeper, obviously related to Jerry Rice there. Garendo is one of those mid to late round running backs I do like a lot. I picked Kimani Vidal out of Troy, but I think Garendo is still really solid. And then you get the other, 3 corners might be a little much, but, today's day and age, you might be able to move one of those guys to safety or slot, et cetera. You can move these guys around. Then you get edge and linebacker to round it out. So I do like this one from Dave. I'll give this one, outside of 3 corners, probably a solid A-, B+. I think this was a solid one from Dave. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. We'll be right back here tomorrow talking more Ravens. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.